Happy New Year and welcome to the first 2022 painting webinar of I don't even know what I'm saying, but yes, Happy New Year. And this is the first painting webinar of 2022. That's right. I'm so excited. We're so excited that I don't even know how to put sentences together already. So today's Friday, January 7th, and we're gonna paint white fabric pieces. And so we're recording this webinar, and because some people are interested in watching it later, so we decided to record it, and we're gonna initiate this painting series today, and we're gonna run it for 2 weeks instead of 1 week. And so yeah, and Jen, how are you? Happy New Year.
Hi, Happy New Year. I know, it's wild. 2022.
I know.
Let's just put a blessing out there. I've already saged, so
Okay, good. Perfect.
to keep those blessings coming.
Yes, exactly. No, that's right. I mean, we had a moment to think about like the year, and we put out the painting resolutions, and it's a good time to renew our commitment to practice and also recognize how healthy and good it is for ourselves. So I'm looking forward to a year full of spending time with you, Jen, and painting.
Ditto, my friend. Absolutely.
Whatever comes our way, I don't care. So yeah, and I'm gonna start essentially, I'm gonna switch this, and I shared, okay, perfect. I think that's good. And I shared the image. I wasn't sure what I was gonna do. Sorry about this. And Jen, the noise is, the sound is okay, right? Because I don't have the microphone with me.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, good. But essentially, yeah, so I'm gonna start sketching. Let me see if I can just move this a little bit this way, so I'm out of the way. All right, I'm gonna start sketching. I'm using 12 by 16 cotton paper arches. The other papers that we've been using for oil, which we said that they're actually much better than arches and cheaper. I forgot the two brands that we used before, but anyhow, none of those come with 12 by 16 size. So only arches comes 12 by 16, and I'm gonna commit myself also to do 12 by 16 for these assignments. One of the resolutions that we thought about is reducing the size of our format and increasing the time painting on it. So I listened to a few painters in the past like few weeks, and exchanging experiences and seeing other artists work on the field, and using observational approaches. And I realized that 12 by 16 is a very ambitious size. I also have been watching interior design videos because I don't know if you had a chance, Jen, but I love to watch interior designers forecast the trends, the interior design trends for 2022.
Ooh, let's hear it. I remember you totally called the waterfall island moment. So I'm very excited to hear.
Yeah, I think some of them continue, but one of the ones that made me the happiest is small paintings on big walls. So some designers are saying that the large scale canvases are not trending right now, and people love to put like really precious small handmade original artwork on large wide walls with some accessories in front, or crowding the space. But I love the small paintings on big walls trend for 2022.
Love that. I am ahead of its time.
Yeah, with very ornate frames, by the way. So frames are
Right,
back
right.
back in
Oh
vintage
no, there
frames.
goes the wallet.
I know, but yeah, I smiled, and I thought this is great. So again, sort of like keeping the 12 by 6. I mean, I'm sorry, the 9 by 12. If you have it, it's a good idea, and even going smaller. And just because we don't know how much time we can commit to painting, it makes better sense to reduce the size of your scale, the scale of the format, and increase the work that you put on the painting. And it reminds me of the Eugene Boudin painter, who was the very first plein air painter before he taught some impressionists how to do it. And he was very prolific, and I think he painted in Normandy and at the beach, or somewhere in that area north of France. And his paintings are really tiny, and the Norton Simon has a collection of Boudins, and they're so precious and beautiful. So I think it's a combination of um, many factors, and maybe we can make a prediction right here of the futurology style. But because people are moving in smaller spaces and things are becoming so expensive, I think the real estate inside of a home, it becomes much more important. So naturally, the artwork that you take with you, it's gonna become smaller and smaller. So it makes sense that in near future, people would just be more interested in smaller paintings than large scale canvases, unless you have like a super big mansion, I would guess. All
Poor
right.
Darlene just revealed that for the first time she's doing 12 by 16.
Oh, great.
But yeah, exactly. This is the time to stretch
Yeah,
muscles, Darlene. You're doing the right thing.
absolutely. And also talking to some painters, there's a sort of like a feeling that when you have been working very small for a very long time, something inside you wants to go bigger. So we're just saying that going small, it could be a good idea, but if you've been using 9 by 12, jumping to a bigger size, I think it's just a natural progression. 12 by 16 feels nice and okay and totally doable. And I think that's great. And by the way, I just got from Blake a couple of days ago, I got a portfolio, one of those black portfolios with like sleeves, transparent sleeves. And I am cataloging all the paintings that we did in 2021. It's so nice to see all the work. I did it on paper, but on a portfolio. I'm going to bring it on Tuesday to Trails, Jen, so you can see it.
Oh, I can't wait. That sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice. So, um, anyhow, so yes, and I'm just gonna do this, and okay, perfect, Julie, 10 by 20. I think that's, oh my gosh, great. I love that piece that we talked about, the American Israeli artist. We finished the presentation with an excerpt of an art statement that he put out that I thought it was beautiful. So very interesting. Maybe Jen, if you can, the last artist we talked about, the last slide on the presentation in the folder. I didn't have much time to look into other work by him. So if you want, if you can come across any other pieces that may be interesting, because I'm curious about the process, because he uses other materials beyond painting.
No problem. Yeah, I will do.
Awesome, perfect. So I am gonna set up my parameters. So 12 by 16, rectangular, portrait orientation. First thing I do, I was able to print this out. The printer and that Kinko's, it sucks. But at the same time, I love the fact that the image gets processed in a very random, a very random way. Let me just turn something off. So there's something really human about the amount of ink and toner and whatever the machine has, and then you don't know what you're gonna get, but there's a lot of greens. So what I'm gonna do first is compositionally, I want to make sure that I have enough space around, and I'm just gonna be a little bit more untidy or careless, I would say. So I'm gonna do my silhouette. I don't even know how that's gonna work, but I don't have a yardstick right here, but I'll just do. So this we thought of this being not only a conceptual concept, pardon the redundant word, that fits the beginning of the year, but at the same time, it's just practicing fabric folds. So I think that's a very classic approach to painting practice, or a classic subject. So we've done it a few times in the past, I believe, not many. So this could be a good opportunity to make a subject that is meaningful symbolically, and at the same time classic in its challenge, just fabric folds. So reviewing our work from last year, I realized that, you know, one of our biggest strengths is coming up with really crazy assignments, because, you know, I find that we got some paintings that are so unusual and unpredictable that I feel like that's something cool. So this feels like an odd subject, a white flag, and how do you do it? And we put some images of white flags on the folder. There are not many contemporary images of white flags in the literal sense, but there are some, and we're gonna add more because we're gonna take this assignment on the road for the next 2 weeks. So excited that you guys are joining, Julie and Darlene. We are gonna put your paintings, if you want to, on the newly launched section of the gallery. All right, so I think I'm done with my first silhouette. And what am I looking for when I do my first silhouette? So very specifically, I'm looking for the space around the focal points. So going back to concepts that we talked about throughout the entire year last year, reduce the amount of focal points to 3 or less to simplify the composition. And not only that, once you either reduce them or group them together, find out what's the scale and the position within the format that you're using. Nothing more, there's nothing more, I wouldn't say irritating, annoying, or frustrating. I think that's the word, that's the perfect word, than starting your representational translation of the subject and finding out that it may read like off frame because some of the edges of that focal point are dangerously close to the edges of the format. So before you move forward, just find out the scale and the position. What's not important here, what's absolutely not important at all is if your lines are recognizable or make sense, or proportions match, or there's something that doesn't read quite like the objects that you're sketching. That is not even at the bottom of the list of criteria. It hasn't made its entrance yet. So there's an exercise of being confident in moving forward without having something that looks like something recognizable. All right, so after my first silhouette, I already did my structural line, which is only this one right here and perhaps some of the folds. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the silhouette, to the lines of the silhouette, because I'm content with the placement. I think I'm content, right? Yeah, because it's a little bit towards the left. Because if I would have put this in the center, this positive space and this positive space would have created a lot of weight on the right and would have created certain imbalance on the left. So I'm a little bit happy that you have a little bit less space right here than here. This will change, obviously, but what I'm going to do next is just go to the main lines and start refining or bringing some variations. I'm still working on silhouette. I'm not going to do anything else inside. I'm just gonna, yeah, this is okay. So the fabrics allows us to be, or they allow some forgiving room to make changes. So it's not like we're doing a face or anything that has to be more anatomically correct. It's just a piece of fabric. So there's something nice about not having the outside pressure to be more accurate in proportions. Okay, so I'm looking at things that I could do to prevent the fabric looking stiff or artificial or without the look of gravity pulling down. Because we have a tendency of simplifying nuances on the line, and we end up creating something with much more stiffness than the actual object. So I think that's what I'm looking for, and trying not to create something super stiff or rigid or heavy, because stiff lines or rigid lines create the illusion of something being heavier in weight. And this is sort of like almost a psychological approach, in the sense that the eye of the viewer may not be able to recognize that, but they sense this sort of like weight. So I'm doing my first structural lines in the fabric, the piece of fabric. So here we go. Yeah, I think so. This is a little bit very rigid and stiff and vertical. It's not so much on the image. So I'm going to try to break that a little bit. And in the course of doing that, I may just change the rest of the drawing. So I'm going to be careful not to spend too much time here. So time-wise, I think that's good. Yeah, I think that's good. And so, yeah, I think that's good. What else? Step back, see your drawing from a distance. And the hand, let me just do the hand. I wanted to, when I took the image, I took it yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. I wanted to simplify the hand. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, because I thought I'm just going to pick up a stick from an olive tree that we have and then tie it up, which could have been really cute. But at the same time, I felt like that was too niche and maybe not appealing enough. And so I kind of like just grabbed, I grabbed the piece of cloth and then I just put it like that. It's not just a piece of cloth. It means so much how you hold it. And in fact, we were just before, during the session, we were just talking, Jen and I, about a painting that Darlene did in the summer of 2020, I believe, of someone standing in smoke and then holding something with their hands. I believe it was a piece of fabric. So Jen, I forgot the title of but do you mind if you retrieve that image and put it in the folder?
Yes, I would love to.
Because that was a great, it was a great point that you brought out, because I think, yeah, we could observe and see how that, maybe we didn't read it that way, or I didn't read it that way back then.
Right.
Maybe now it has a different meaning, which I find mind-blowing.
So yeah, I was thinking the same thing as, yeah, it's from front page, I believe.
Oh.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it originally, let me see if I can find the original.
Yeah. When he's
Because it
summer
definitely,
2020. Right?
yeah,
What were you
definitely like a white flag. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. Sorry.
You talk.
Oh, it's just gonna say I can't find the original image that this is.
Really? I think it was in the...
Yeah, for some reason the original image isn't here, which is so upsetting. Everyone else's original image is here, but
oh wow.
Unless it's just a piece of,
I think it was in the LA Times. It's okay. I mean, it doesn't. Okay, so it's totally fine. Yeah, we'll look at it later.
But I definitely have I'll post the painting.
Okay.
But I can't find, unless it was something that Darlene.
Maybe we took it down, or we were.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. It's from she says it's from a Midwestern newspaper.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll post it because.
Okay. Yeah. Because it's so interesting. I mean, the most interesting thing is the fact that first that you brought it up, and then also that connection between that holding something and then maybe symbolizing, truths. I don't know. All right, so I just started shading a little bit. Time-wise, I think it's perfect. Just the first half an hour, and it just gives me a little bit of an opportunity to understand the light context in this composition. So I tried to find a place to hold the fabric that was somewhat unified. So I was outside, there was more light outside. This wasn't necessarily intentional, that inside of the house. This was close to sunset. So inside of the house was already dark. And I wanted natural light, because the artificial light just creates a different, with the camera, the smartphone camera creates a different look. So I wanted outdoor light, and that's why I just came outside. And then I like this color unity, the grass and the background. So I think I'm going to treat the background in a very solid way, or homogeneous way, or blocking it out. I'm not sure if I'm going to do, maybe I'll just do later. The separation between ground and upright foliage. But for now, I'm just content with the composition. And this should allow us to preview the arrangement of focal points on the format that we're working on, whether it's 12 by 16 or the 10 by 20 that you mentioned, Julie. But try to just imagine this as a painting without any brush strokes and see the focal points and the edges of that format, how they interact with each other. Because as we said before, a painting with a weak composition ends up being weak regardless of the amount of detail that you put on it. Whereas a painting with a strong composition creates such a strong foundation that it doesn't matter how developed the detail is, it's still a very strong painting. So I just created the same palette and anticipating in this room, I don't know how it happened, but I don't have yellow, the light yellow, but I have two very strange greens that I forgot I had. Green, gold, and sorry, but I'm gonna say this, cadmium green. So we're not using cadmium, but I'm using this color right now. Okay, so I'm just gonna change this. But yeah, and this is from Gamblin, the 1980 line. The 1980 line of Gamblin is considered more of a student line. They put a little bit more fillings inside of the combination of pigment and oil. So it's less expensive, but not as rich as the regular line. So 1980, I don't know why it's called 1980, but yeah. I have no idea how I ended up with this tube of cadmium green. I don't know, but anyhow, and the green gold, yeah, the green gold is non-toxic, so I think that's good. Okay, and just gonna bring, I don't have my typical big brush. I forgot to bring one. So I'm using this super cheapo brush that I got at Michael's, of all places. Michael's, it's a good place to buy canvases, and also they have some supplies that are essentials. Like, for example, the palette paper at Michael's is much cheaper, and they have really, really crappy brushes. And for some reason, I just had a pack of brushes, and that's what I'm going to use. So my two liquids, turpentine and the oil combination. And I'm going to do darker to lighter. So maybe what I'll do is a combination of two neutrals, the raw umber and the yellow ochre. It's not going to be green, but maybe I'll add some of the light blue to it. It doesn't matter. Okay, the purpose of this is just to prime the paper, prime the surface. And so yeah, turpentine, transparency, consistency, very liquid. And the idea is just to apply, to start working on our imprimatura, which is the Italian word for staining, really. I am crazy for the book of this season, What Painting Is. It's so good, and if you get to read it, you're gonna read passages that will remind you of our classes, but in a much more sophisticated and articulate way, because he's amazing. But it's so nice to see other people hit the same concepts. And I'm saying this because there's a chapter or a passage that talks about Italian painter and how there are some color plates inside of the book, and which the author refers to as examples. So there's one plate that talks about Italian painter that I didn't know about, and how this one right here, I'll just try to remember, but anyhow, it's a section of a painting, and this is a boat and this is water, but it goes in depth about how you can see the imprimatura through the brushstrokes. And this was a Renaissance painting, and it was so nice to kind of like read about it and see how some artists left the imprimatura uncovered intentionally, purposely. We see Renaissance paintings and we think, you know, they're very meticulous in how much, how many layers were on top of each other, and yet they were as adventurous and artistic as we are today in leading some of the imprimatura showing through the painting. And that was one of the cases, especially with natural textures like water or rock formations or stuff like that. And that imprimatura in this example, let's see if I can find it, I'm not sure if I will, the name of the artist, but it's essentially done with browns, with raw umber. I don't know if it was raw umber or what kind of pigment it was, but I think I just lighter. It's so fantastic. It's not a fiction novel, so, but at the same time, the author uses a very lyrical language, and it kind of like goes back and forth from very technical alchemy related descriptions, which are extremely boring at some point, but it never goes too long without going back to painting and applying those concepts to the experience of someone using paint. It's truly amazing. I cannot find the Italian artist that he used to be a painter, the author, and then became an art historian. So he has that background in which he sort of like pulls from and relies with, I guess. But yeah. So I'm just using this brown for the imprimatura. I'm going to use a little bit more yellow ochre, perhaps for the skin tone, and maybe some black. I need to get chromatic black. I have some leftover ivory black, which I shouldn't have. Well, I shouldn't have. I have it, so I'm using it because we know that it has bone ashes in it, I think, this one. Formulations keep changing every year, but that's part of the ivory black. And it's not a very good, it's a little bit cold. So, whoa, yo. So here we go. I think I just put too much right here. So I'm gonna use the rag and remove some of that. And as you notice, and just I'm being pretty physical and bold about this. Okay, so I'm going to continue. I think I'm just using the same color everywhere, which is fine. Traditional imprimaturas are only made with one earthy note. Maybe? I don't know. Okay, so that's where I'm focused right now, doing the imprimatura, working darker to lighter, and using the solvent and some earth notes to apply what we call color fields, which are really unrestricted or unreined, I don't know if that's a good word or not, areas of color. Okay, and then inside of the rack, I'm just going to use the light blue in certain spots. I didn't shade it, but I think I can just go ahead and do this. Oh, it feels so good to paint again. So I didn't paint when I was in Spain. I had all these plans. I wanted to, because I don't have like a proper easel there. And I wanted to ship an easel, a wooden easel, one of those French Julian easels. And I wanted to go into the city and then just paint some buildings. But it just didn't happen. It was, first of all, it was freezing cold, or at least cold to compared to my inner thermostat. It wasn't freezing cold, but it was cold. And then with the Omicron thing, yeah, that was it. It was over. So it was good. Just like stay home and then read the book. I'm using white right now, which I shouldn't use. So, but I'm done with the Imprimatura. I think that's okay. I'm just gonna mess it up a little bit so it doesn't look too perfect. Notice that I'm just rubbing and grooming almost the pigment all over to pierce through anything that could make it look like a coloring layer. Okay, so Imprimatura done. And now I'm just gonna take a little bit of a break and start talking about the next step, which is first notes. And I think there was a point, I forgot, Jen, one of the webinars we did last year, that we tried to find the Italian terms or the French terms with, right? And I don't know what these first notes would be. I don't remember.
Let me see if I can find them again.
No sweat.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so nothing has changed in the sense that in 2021, we shifted the importance of the painting process from second notes to first notes. One of the most fundamental steps in the entire process. And I think 2022 will continue, unless something happens, will continue feeling this way. And the reason is because we have to do two major things. One has to do with color, and the other one, I think I forgot the other one, but one has to do with color, and then the other one, the consistency or the opacity. It's gonna come to me, but for sure the color study is one of the most fundamental things that happens during the first notes. And I do have the rest of the brushes here, so this is good. And I'm just going to use a medium brush, two of the medium brushes. Yeah. Okay, so one flat, one round, but I'll start with the round. We like our round brushes. So I'm going to go darker to lighter. This is a good example to talk about things that we like to do. For example, work on peripheral areas before we actually work on the focal points. Because our background is the darkest part of the painting, that's where we're going to start our first notes. We're going to start with the background. And we may not just do the entire area from the focal point to the edges, but at least we're going to study the color, and then we're going to place down a block of color. So first notes, color blocking. And I'm going to bring an empty one, but I have some spots left open on my clear space, and I'm switching mediums, by the way. From the oil, from the solvent to the oil. So fantastic. So this green gold is pretty rich. I'm gonna bring in some black. And I think that's very good, but I feel like the pigmentation is way too strong. So I'm bringing a little bit of gray. I think that's very good. So I'll bring some gray. Perfect. So I always try to watch out for excessive pigmentation on first note layer. I try to avoid just using up all my color credit in one bust. No, just be thrifty color-wise. Don't start using too much color too early. It will be a mistake. How about bad judgment? Unless you know what you're doing, it's just gonna put you in a very uncomfortable situation. So, oh yeah, edges. That's right. So first notes, the two main components. Number one is the color study. We are processing color and creating directions of color. And number two, we are sort of like bringing back the edges that we lost with the imprimatura. So just with the oil, and this feels a little bit thick still, with the oil, and I'm not going to do darker or lighter right now. I'm just going to, I feel like my paint, because it's cold, or it's colder than summer, it's stiff, a little bit stiffer than a month ago. So I'm gonna put some solvent on it. But the idea, notice what I'm doing, the idea is to apply very sound principles. Let's just go back to what we know or what we rely on. Okay, so that was the word, rely on, and which is first notes, clarify the step. It consists of two very important premises. We're starting processing color, number one, and at the same time, happening in an overlap manner, we are rebuilding the edges and having an opportunity to just make changes on the drawing. So I think that's a sound, very strong principle that we can apply regardless of the subject. This is what makes me feel safe about tackling a subject that may look terrifying. Knowing that I can just repeat in general terms the basis of the principles that we apply when we go through the process.
Julio, I found the Flemish, it's the Flemish technique.
Okay.
Is that what we're thinking? Okay,
Yeah.
This is what we did. The Flemish technique, also known as the 7-step method. The 7 steps are imprimatura, number 2, or that's number 1. Number 2, first umber layer. Number 3, second umber layer. Number 4, grayscale layer. Number 5, first color layer. Number 6, second color layer. And then finally 7, detailing layer.
I think I don't think that's obsolete, if you ask.
No, it sounds, I mean, it sounds like kind of what we.
Yeah. We're on the right track, Jen.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much for finding it and bringing it up, because it's such a validation. I mean, obviously, different artists or schools of painting do it differently, but it's such a validation to know that what we say has a reason behind it. And I love the
Totally.
2 layers of umber. I think that's really clever, actually.
Yeah, it's just further is like stick with your neutrals. And I mean, color isn't even introduced until step 5. And what did we decide? I can't remember what it was. Is it every step is a month or
Yeah, I mean, I
it's
think
something crazy?
I think the time between the steps was long, you know,
Right.
and the steps themselves probably they were also very long. But yeah,
Right.
mostly the time between the steps, you had to leave the paint dry
Sure.
for weeks.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Amazing.
amazing. Well, thank you. Yeah, just copy paste that onto the notes. The
Already
webinar.
done, my friend.
Okay,
Already done.
thank you, because that's really valuable information. Really valuable. Okay, just going back to my approximate combination of colors for this green. And we don't have to be accurate. We don't have to be exact. It's only going back to this pattern or steps that you just brought up, Jen. The 2 layers of color that are mentioned before the last layer. This feels really good because what we're doing right now, it's a first approach, and the color will not be exactly matching or accurate. I'm seeing already so many differences, but I feel like this has a lot to do with the application of a first layer of color, which, you know, it's already like the first process layer. Yeah, very good, so good. Thanks, Jen. So I'm going to continue, and time-wise, I think it's good. I didn't set up sort of like a timeline for my strategy, so I'm just going to dedicate. See, I'm gonna move like in spans of 10 minutes, and see in 10 minutes how far I can cover the background. If I'm fairly close to covering it, then I will continue until I complete this. And if not, I will jump to perhaps the hand. I think going back to darker to lighter, perhaps I'm just going to start creating the first note of color, the first color notes. Maybe we should kind of like, maybe we should just do a hybrid between the Flemish style and our style. And instead of saying first notes, we could just say first color notes. What do you think, Jen?
Sounds great.
Perfect. All right. So already new terminology for 2020. Okay, first color notes. I love it. Okay, so okay, good. And so I'm just continuing applying this attached to the border of the focal point, just because I want the focal point to really pop. So I'm not worried about taking these all the way to the edge yet. I can do that, but I think what's more important is to apply it nearby. Why? Because as we said with the first color nodes, what's important is not only to process the first color direction, but also to work with edges. And what better way to work with edges than applying the strokes right next to the edges, separating the background or the negative space or with the positive space. So that's what I'm doing. I'm so grateful that I have this color, and I'm gonna go today and do some shopping and get some cadmium yellow. And I'm sorry. No cadmium yellow. Some yellow that it's without cadmium. I forgot.
Is it the Hansa?
Hansa yellow. Thank you, Fran. I was gonna say Bancha,
Sure.
like Bancha green, but no, Hansa yellow. So yes. Michael's doesn't have Bancha yellow. I mean, Hansa yellow. I don't think so, but It's okay. All right, so I think I'm just getting a little bit lighter and lighter. I think this is something that, I mean, our palette evolved in such a beautiful way in 2021. We dropped colors, we incorporated colors. I mean, it was so great. I mean, so great. So great. I don't know what's going to happen in 2022. I was looking at a fairly new blue. Oh my gosh. It doesn't have like a recognizable name. Maybe Jen, you can help me. I think it's like YBL or YBM blue. The name of the blue consists of like consonants only. There are no vocals on that blue. I'm sorry.
No. I'm sure I can find it.
Gamblin has it, and apparently this was discovered not super recently, just a few years ago, but and it's not natural, it's chemical, but it's non-toxic. And apparently it's a much superior blue than ultramarine or other blues, even cobalt blue. And the price was prohibitive. And when they made colors with this pigment, no one could afford the blue. But I knew about the blue because I saw it like maybe last year, but we never made the jump because of the price. But the price has dropped a little bit. And I'm curious, I think we should do a tutorial about this blue because it's very well researched. It was discovered by accident, I believe. And it has a weird name with only consonants, YMBL or Y something. All right, so I think I did less than 10 minutes and I'm pretty much almost done with the background. So since that's the case, I'm gonna finish covering that area because already it's looking so great based on the little amount of work that I put. I am committing to putting more work on my paintings because I looked at the portfolio of the work and it's so good to see the evolution of your brushstrokes throughout 12 months. You really get a portrait of your painting process that motivates you not only to do it better this year, but also have better criteria, raise your own bar. I think we're gonna have to send an email and just telling people, gather all your scattered paintings or the paintings that may be scattered in your home and put them in a portfolio. It's amazing how powerful it is when you see them all together. Or in your studio, if you just pin them on the wall or put them on easels, create a little art show of the work. And there will be something that will confront you, obviously, but it's such a beautiful way to create a trigger, pushing you to make it better next time. So yeah, okay, anyhow, and I'm so happy we're gonna do the 2-week cycles. I can't believe, I mean, it's beautiful also to look back and then see where we're coming from. We're coming from 18 by 24 acrylic, which was so amazing. And I can't believe those were like incredible experiences.
Okay, Julio, I found it. It's YLNMN blue. No, No big deal.
Yeah.
Thank God you said why, because I don't know that I would have found it otherwise. But I will post the picture.
Does it kind of like mention a little bit of the story or the history or something where you found?
Okay. It says, from the tube, Gamblin blue is a quote true blue, charged with an undeniable pigment load. The formula created in 2020 by Robert Gamblin packs as much pigment as it can possibly bear to give you the full experience. Dense, concentrated, and highly opaque, you'll notice immediately that this paint is truly something special. If you mix 80-20 cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, you'll come up with a color that to the eye looks a lot like this thing. But this thing's tint is what sets it apart from the mixture. Unlike the cobalt ultramarine combo, this blue grays down to a more subdued blue.
Interesting.
And then it goes on.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I think I have my eyes on that blue. I want to give it a try. What's the price? Because it isn't.
Yeah, it's $75.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It says originally when the pigment became available as a sample in 2016, we thought the sticker price would kill the color before it was ever created. But the pigment price stabilized and we ran the numbers again. More and more painters inquired about our plans year after year. But as part of our brand promise, we are committed to bringing you the right product for your work at an honest price. We listened to you and made our first limited edition batch in November 2020. They sold out so fast, we didn't even get a chance to share the news on Instagram.
Wow.
So we're thrilled to bring you a second batch of limited edition.
I think it's sold out. Is it for sale?
It's out of stock.
It's sold out.
Yeah, it's totally sold out.
We gotta get this blue.
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be like Bieber's clothes. They don't exist.
True. Geez. Yeah. Anyhow, so maybe it's always fun to again 2021 our palette transformed and grew and developed and found a strong reason to exist with the blacks that we use and the yellow and the green that we created with yellow and black. So every time every painting contributed to finessing the soundness of why we're using this palette. So I'm looking forward to this year to find out what's going to happen to our palette. And I want to give this color a try because, again, it's non-toxic. And it could be a good opportunity to find out. We have already such gorgeous blues. The Prussian blue is possibly my favorite addition to the blue palette.
Me too.
Yeah, the Prussian blue is quite something. So I, okay, so I, while you were just reading about this blue, I did a little bit of sampling on the darker area of my forearm and the bottom of the hand. So there's a little bit of amber and linen and the ecru, the ecru and a little bit of yellow ochre, and I put some green because there's the light bouncing as well. So I'm creating a color, and then on this first color note layer, I am just gonna block out this area with this tone. So first color note. And I love, in fact, I would say, Jen, based on what you said about, or refreshing the 7 steps, I think the idea of, instead of like bringing a third note, we always say first, second, third. I think it makes more sense to kind of like push the details at the end, because it kind of like slows you down. So I think maybe instead of like third layer, we could introduce the last layer as details.
Detail layer, I like that.
same as the Flemish style. Okay, so I think that's my second, I'm sorry, my first color note. Blocking it out. I'm not gonna do anything. My hand wants to do something lighter here already, but I'm not gonna do it. Okay, and then I'm just gonna go to the top and I'm gonna explore and find out the skin tone. Oh, also, this is something, if you want, you can text me this because I need to put it in our calendar on the website. I found out, I don't know if we've talked about it or not, but I think November 20th is International Skin Tone Day.
Okay.
I think it's November 20th, and it's I don't know if it's international but it's Skin Tone Day, and it's yeah. So I'm gonna do the test with a little bit of pink and yellow ochre. You know, we usually say that with skin tones, there's a tendency of the color that we process to yellow a little bit, but I don't mind having that. Okay, that's good. So my combination for these colors is going to be ecru, ochre, and a little bit of the pink, the salmon rose. And after that, I'm just going to do the color blocking right there. Time-wise, okay, yeah, it's very good. Okay, so ecru, yellow ochre, and some pink. So that's going to be my go-to for combination for this part of the skin.
Real quick while I have you, so the last slide that I remember was of just the flag, but then the last painting that we have on the album of the
Yes, the Tiziano.
Okay.
It's the one before, I believe. It's the long one, right?
Okay.
Because the very last slide, it's the portrait of the woman wearing white.
The portrait of the woman, yeah.
No, that's the Tiziano, yeah.
You want the
one before, I think.
Sorry.
Yeah, the one before, the one by Adam Yekutieli.
Great. You want me to look up more of his work?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay. Got it.
I've never heard his name before. No Hope.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Got it.
Thanks. Yeah. No, it seems like, you know, sometimes, I mean, especially, I mean, that's a completely different ballgame. And but because of his, I don't know if I should say heritage or nationality or combination of nationalities, I like his approach to the political stuff by not taking sides, but at the same time not being neutral. I don't know how to explain it. So I wonder if his work has the same magic, because it's so hard either to become neutral or to have a bias, especially with something so charged about, you know, what's happening in that part of the world. And at least in that statement, it just it seemed to me, I don't know, I don't know much about him or anything, that he is able to position himself in a way that it's not trying to either be biased or be neutral. And watch, you're gonna find something that's gonna be either anti-Semitic or
Oh, geez, I hope not.
or who knows. We don't. I have no idea about any of the rest of his work, but yeah. And speaking of all these elements, I should have put the link to the report by this um, uh, forecast person or trend spotter, because it's very interesting. It's just very interesting. Other points that she mentions, the continuation of complexity and the angst, themes that have happened in 2021 that will continue and amplify in 2022. I love this kind of like stuff, you know, mostly because there is the sort of like a fortune teller kind of predictions, which are always like doomsday scenarios, and you know, I don't look at those anymore. But then this is sort of like more researched and done by people that live through with data, and corporations use it to make products, to plan, to see where the consumer, you know, desires will evolve, so they can just create something before those desires crystallize. So, and I didn't mention this in the presentation, but she works for a tobacco company, for Philip Morris, which is kind of like horrible. But at the same time, it just gives you an idea of the work that goes behind the curtain in all these like mega corporations. So when she speaks, people listen. She, you know, she has a reputation for being spot on, recognizing patterns before they actually develop. And you know, we've gone through. I remember the story, Jen, that you mentioned about. I think it was your mom, your family going to that bar. I forgot where it was, and I think the waiter was trans, and then so that's
Lordy. Lordy baby. They still talk about it. It was brought up many a time when I was home. I hope we're not going back to cactus whatever or something. And I was like, you are ridiculous.
Oh no, it's just so interesting because this anecdote is an example of precisely this, you know, the two sides, and then the majority being in the middle. And it's important, I think, to also pull yourself back and see the picture, because sometimes when you're entrenched on one side, you think that's a do or die situation. Everyone, you think everyone either thinks one thing or the other, very binary. And it's important to see that you know, there's a swath of people in the middle that eventually get discouraged, for better or for worse. So to pivot from thinking I am right and I will fight on this hill, to thinking, wait a second, if we don't, if we're not careful, these people in the middle who are the ones who really make changes,
right,
totally tune out.
Right.
So I wonder, in regards of like advertising and making commercials, if corporations this year will continue taking steps to include more people, and make it more sort of like inclusive, which it's been amazing to see commercials this year with more inclusivity, or if instead they're just gonna tippy-toe over it and kind of like target middle ground?
Well, this is something interesting that I just kind of like to kind of to piggyback on what you just said. I've been watching the latest season of Queer Eye.
Yeah.
I love so much, and
Wait, the Texas one or in Japan?
the Texas one.
Texas, yeah.
And it's been so amazing because I think it would be pretty. I think it would be a lot easier for casting. Or not, I mean, that's not true. I don't know if it'd be easier for casting, but I think it'd be a lot easier on probably the hosts to, have this understanding that everyone that they're going to help completely, has been around, someone that's non-binary or identifies as queer or is even gay, and then like on top of that is entering their lives and, helping them and assisting them and guiding them. But, that's not the case. A lot of the quote heroes on the show are people that haven't, or at least like a handful of them are.
Right. Yeah.
Have not been around people, like them. And what I thought was interesting, this one guy in particular who just was really standoffish and just was like really trying to digest, kind of who these men were and, how he was going to interact with them. Is he was getting his hair cut with Jonathan.
Yes.
You like that part, Julio? Yeah. And he, right, haircut with Jonathan, who is non-binary. Yeah, just to fill everyone in. And, Jonathan was kind of teaching him like what, it means to be non-binary, what, knowing someone's pronouns means, all of that. And something that I think was really wonderful that he said is it okay if I ask someone what their pronouns are? Like, is that okay, or are they going to be offended? And Jonathan was like, no, like, please ask. Like, that is completely welcomed and, encouraged. And I just think that that's really, I think for like, my family, I think their biggest fear was getting it wrong and not, even though they were being completely insensitive to the entire thing, I think their actual biggest fear was getting it wrong and embarrassing the person, embarrassing maybe themselves, when actually you can just ask if you feel, like you're unsure or you want to be respectful or, get it right. And that was kind of like the biggest part of our conversation at the dinner table was like, it's so hard now. That was their whole thing. It's so hard now. And how they felt so bad for teachers and, trying to, having to know all this new information. But I think, what Jonathan said so beautifully is like, all you have to do is ask, like it doesn't have to be so hard. It's just a polite thing.
Yeah, I watched that. Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like asking, someone what they do for a living.
Or where are they from?
Where they're from. Oh man, I had to bring you in on that conversation, Julio, that I had.
Oh my gosh.
In Virginia.
So, it's always, it's nice to going back to this subject and stuff like that. It's there are, we're all the same, in many ways. So there are ways where we can really, bypass, not bypass in the sense ignore, but just common sense and etiquette. It's we're not reinventing anything. It's just
right. Yeah.
When you take your ego out of this and then you just want to connect with another human being, you find a way. There's no I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it was nice to read that, she identifies these two sides, on the other side, just being annoyed or irritated or feeling like, as you said, this is so hard. We cannot say
Mhm.
anything anymore. And immediately just getting into that funky mode of like rejecting just because,
Right.
which, yeah, anyhow, yeah, it's not hard. And it's
Well,
about,
sorry, I keep interrupting you. Go ahead.
no, it's just about etiquette and being, I think grace, etiquette, I mean, universal things, I would say. There's no new, it's kind of like learning new rules or changing, from one planet to the next planet. It just feels
Right.
kind of like what you would do in any situation, honestly.
Well, and I think you say it so beautifully too. And when I watch you like work so hard and constantly, learn more and more about um, the verbiage and the language and how important, language is and why it matters, because you say very candidly, I want to give other people the respect that I hope that they would give me. And um and and so I try hard and I work hard and I make sure that I am sympathetic and
Right,
respectful and everything else,
right.
because of that. So I think it's true. If we expect other people to give us respect and and our fair dignity, then I think that we need to return that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And perhaps, with with the social media, it just feels like this kind of like etiquette and respect gets thrown out the window because I mean, people are vicious and angry and aggressive and bullies. So I just
Mhm.
feel like we're going the other way. Um,
Yeah,
on one end, we're going the other way in that sense, and on another end, we're just not cultivating what it's universal as etiquette to make someone else feel comfortable. I mean, when you have guests, that's what you do.
exactly.
It's nothing new. Um,
Yeah, and of all places, like, you know, I, the South is very,
right,
yeah, they really pride themselves on
right. Yeah, it's
etiquette
amazing.
and hospitality and, welcoming and
Yeah,
um so you would think that, that would go hand in
yeah.
hand.
There's a lot to learn from that.
Hmm.
Ask me.
Yeah,
It's a lot to learn because it's beautiful
it is. It
and
is.
really something to be extremely proud of.
It really is. It's amazing, like I said, I grew up in that way. And that's just kind of how I kind of thought the world was, or, at least the rest of the United States. And it's so funny as I get older and, really I have some separation from that childhood and that and growing up that way, you really see that it's not. That everywhere has their own identity, um, which is great, but that it's, I guess what I'm seeing is that it's something special.
Yeah, 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 totally. Yeah. Well, we'll see how this year unfolds in that sense, but apparently it's going to be much more hostile and dramatic, and lines will be drawn in the battlefield of words, and this thing will be used obviously politically as weapons to divide more people. So nothing new that we haven't experienced before, unfortunately, but um, so um, anyhow, um, I'm gonna do a little touch base or reset. I'm done with my first color notes. I think I'm just gonna embark on second color notes. I love this addition to our layers. So I color blocked and I started adding a little bit of details and adding some white. Maybe I just went a little bit too far. But the idea was to explore the color palette, create it, process colors from the raw material that we have as a staple palette, and give a little bit of an initial color direction, and at the same time just bringing back the edges of the drawing that we had at the beginning. So I feel pretty happy about the stage in that sense. I think it just developed a lot. So I'm gonna dedicate the next 35 minutes, 40 minutes, because we just started 5 minutes past the hour, to work on second color nodes. So this will be moving from color blocks to more of color pixelation. There's gonna be a little bit more blending and refining of values. And yeah, it's sort of like building on this initial first color node layer, and then just adding a wider range of values on colors. So I'm going to start with the actual background. I think I'm going to move with the same order that I did with the first color node. So that means that I'm going to do background, hand, and then the piece of fabric. So let's do it. I'm gonna use the same brush, but this time I'm just gonna start creating a darker version of that green, a much darker version of that green. And I think I'm gonna work with the same. I'm gonna use a little bit of umber because I want to pull back the green. So umber, it's a really dark, warm color. The green is a cold note. So I have a couple of ways of pulling back color. One is to kind of like mix it with a primary neutral, like gray or black, or even white if I want a high key. But the other one is to bring a counter temperature color. So if I want to pull back the green, I could use, I didn't even touch the burnt sienna, but with green, anything that's orange or reddish or brown pulls back that intense pigmentation. So I think just with the raw umber would be enough. I don't have to pull it back anymore. And I'm not going to use, oh yeah, it's beautiful. It's perfect. I'm not going to use the plastic anymore because I have like my color history on the palette. So I can always depart from some of the colors there. And what I'm looking for also, so I'm trying to articulate my strategy. I have 40 minutes left. I'm going to dedicate a third of these 40 minutes to each of the sections, regardless of how much I accomplish, because I want to be as efficient as possible with that time. That's number one. Number two is that I'm going to start with background, then hand, and then fabric. So those 3/3 are going to have like an order as well. It's not going to be random. And within those, I'm going to work with values. So this is going to be my second opportunity to work with color, widening the values, and also looking at the edges. So one of the things also that we mentioned, in addition to all this, is always look for areas where there's high contrast. Those super high contrast areas can really build an illusion of perspective. It can really detach positive elements against negative elements, in the sense like something that's material and something that's immaterial. The highest, absolute highest contrast in value on my focal point right here, or the entire image, is this right here. I have almost pure white on the edge, and this is very dark. So regardless of the foliage right here, which I may do in the final stage of the painting, which will be the details, what I'm mostly concentrated right now is in building contrast. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna bring contrast, and I'm using a random brushstroke direction, very short and pixelated, because I don't want this to have a very artificial or simplified or too predictable separation between areas. So yeah, so this, and the fabric has a, I don't know what's the name. Kian would be good at this. I don't know what's the name of this weave or whatever that's called, woven. I don't even know. I lost a third of my grammar. I left it behind in Spain. It always happens like that.
I think that I left mine in Spain too.
Oh, thanks, friend.
Don't you worry.
True friendship, yeah. Speaking of that, it was so nice to watch TV in Catalan and listen to radio. It was so nice. It was so nice. So they passed a law. I'm not gonna take too much time, but they passed recently a law in the entire country that limits or creates percentages in Catalan schools about how much Spanish they are obligated to teach. And it reminded me, and it's a devastating blow to the language, because there's never been a problem about communicating and switching back and forth from one language to the other. It's never been an impediment in all the years that I've lived. But because of the tensions between central government and regional government, so now they put this law. It reminded me when I first came to the United States, 1998. I think it was Proposition 227, if I'm not mistaken. It was a really big deal because all public schools moved from teaching Spanish and English to teaching English only. So it wasn't even like a percentage. So it was just overnight, all the schools had to kind of like ditch any Spanish curriculum and be all in English. And it was also devastating for many reasons, but anyhow, so.
Where was this, Julio? That was here,
It was
or?
in California. It was a proposition.
Yeah.
I think it was a Super Tuesday or one very important election that happened. I wasn't familiar with the electoral cycles, but
Sure.
I knew it was like May or April, and this proposition, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. 227, I believe, and it was just a blow to a lot of educators in schools that taught in both, and so.
Ugh, what a big mistake that was, to miss out on that education.
I think so. I
Yeah.
mean, there were political reasons for that, and then obviously you could argue that both sides had their own reasons, and I just, as an empath, I understand why people were really pissed that Spanish was being taught in an American school, funded with taxes coming from people that disagreed with that concept. But in the end, the only losing people were the students and also the teachers. And I know this very well because I was hired as a public school teacher before the proposition to teach in Spanish. So my job would have been at the time, okay, I'm just coming to the US and I'm going to teach Spanish in a public school. But then, things changed, and I just had to adjust and adapt. And the kids adapted too. The kids are fairly resilient, and everyone adapts. Anyhow, going back to this, so the legislation also happened, something similar, but it was only 25%. I mean, what happened? I kept telling people when I was there, well, in California it was 100%. So you couldn't teach in Spanish. It was all English overnight. So now they're doing 25% in Spanish and 75% in Catalan, which it's kind of like ridiculous because they don't know how they're going to measure how much of one or the other. But the damage is done. And so they were doing some studies, and they were saying that as a minority language, every minority language in a country, unless there are initiatives to preserve it, it becomes extinct. So some governments in some countries, they understand the value of having different languages and keeping them alive. Whereas other countries, they don't see value in having multiple languages. They see it as a weakness. So unfortunately, it saddened me that Catalan went from growing to now becoming an extinct language by all metrics. So my parents were devastated, and everyone's sort of like, everyone's not very happy. They were thinking that this may be the last generation that will use Catalan to communicate. And there were some pretty clever intellectuals in the rest of the country that came out in favor of keeping all languages alive. It is possible to educate children and maintain the richness of a country, keeping the languages spoken alive. It's not, one thing doesn't affect the other, but you know how that goes. It's so easy to radicalize positions, and then that was it. Anyhow, sorry, I took too much time explaining this, but I am working on the background. When I traveled to Mexico, when I first came here, I had the opportunity to actually travel to Mexico for the first time. And I went to the Yucatan Peninsula, and I love to, and that was like 1999. I love to see how schools, elementary schools, where because of the politicians at the time, the local politicians, they were funding Mayan being spoken in elementary school. They were bringing teachers, they were trying to resuscitate the original language before Spanish. And I thought, this is just so fantastic for the kids, you know, and for the country, or for the region at least. I don't know how that's going right now, but it you know, it's a good idea to keep languages alive. Who knows, you know, with anyhow, so that kind of like brings the white, and I'm not doing anything but just adding some darker values of that green, specifically around the focal point, and trying not to be too simplistic, or you know, yeah, simplifying too much. To kind of like exaggerate this sort of like engagement between both sides of talking about like truths, implementing the concept of truths when you paint both sides of something. Don't polarize them, don't binarize them. They're not completely separate. There's always an area where things sort of like engage with each other. So same sort of like abstract concept could be applied to painting. It just increases the dynamic effect. It makes the painting much more interesting, less predictable. So totally a similar concept to what we're doing right now, conceptually. Yeah, I think so. So time-wise, okay, I would love to spend the rest of the time with this, but as I said, I'm going to try to focus on a strategy, and I'm going to go to this area for 10 minutes and try to maybe just move to a smaller brush. Yeah. So I want to start blending. So this would be our second color note. And maybe just creating some darker notes right here. I have to squint my eyes, I'm sorry, just because. Since the color is not compartmentalized right here, I just want to find out where my pixelated strokes should land. And then I'll just use the medium brush, the other medium brush. I mean, maybe I should just have a little bit more paint, but I'm gonna work with this sheer layer. I'm gonna bring some oil and just blur. Oh yeah, I don't need more paint for now. Just blur this to create this idea of cylindric. Yep, that's it. A little blurring goes a long way. So I'm not adding any paint. I'm just blurring those edges. I clean my brush because we could get easily carried away with the blurring and then start blending more and more and then end up with no blending at all. Just one big cauldron of soupy mixture of everything. So you have to clean the brush as you blend, and at the same time, I am just I'm gonna apply some lighter notes right up there because I love this kind of like lightness, and especially on the knuckles. And I'm moving the edges. And I'm just bringing the blending tool. It's kind of like brush. And then just blurring or softening that edge. Yeah, not too bad. I love this there's high contrast right here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna imagine a color. Yeah, it's pretty light. So I'm gonna bring it right here and then blend it. Yeah, I think that's good. A lot of progress. This is when I can say that the speed of progress, it's exponential to the time that you spend. So at the beginning, everything goes very slow and barely moving at all. But it gets to a point where a few strokes create a lot of dramatic effects. So you have to be careful because if you are on the same gear as the beginning, you will overwork this. So if you think like you have to spend the same amount of time as the beginning, this will just end up being way too overworked. just adding a little bit of darker notes, but just gonna work with this obviously another time. But there's so many nuanced elements right up here. And I think that's an important part of the hand, you know, that area. All right, so, well, I have a few minutes. I'm just gonna continue and maybe spend some time right up there. So I'm just getting darker elements and then doing this sort of like edge and bringing lighter skin tone and working on the bottom edge. This is a little bit too light, so I'm going to tone it down. And yeah, creating variations. Second color notes are all about variations of value. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just trying to break up the uniformity of the color hue and temperature that I applied on the first color notes by just creating subtle changes within the same hue in order to push the area forward. Yeah, and I still need so much more, but at least I need to bring a little bit of lightness right here. Let me just bring some warmth too, because it's too cold. It's too cold. That white is too cold, but it's okay. I'm barely using oil right now, barely using oil. So, and when I apply a stroke that's much lighter, I try to add less pressure against the surface. Whoops, that's too much. But well, for now, I'm gonna leave it like that. And I'm gonna go to the piece of fabric. I could just spend a couple more minutes and then softening this area. We don't have to be more uniform here, but I think this area, it's a little, I can recognize almost a division that goes higher and then lower. Bring that. Yeah, don't underestimate the power of each tiny brushstroke at this stage. Every small application of paint will give you a different take. I think it's important not to be afraid at all, but at the same time to be measured, to be restrained, to take more pauses, to understand that this changes profoundly with each tiny application. I think, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we had like people joining us for the very first time, which we enjoyed so much because it's sort of like an experiment for us. What do you call like a lab testing situation, testing lab? So we see people that right? They approach the process and they slow down and they don't go beyond. And then we see people that stir that painting over and over. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, yeah. But at the same time, it's hard. But we see other people that are not um, getting ahead of themselves in that sense.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, just when you think that you've been nailed down what to expect from, a new student, they surprise you.
Yeah.
But I have to say that I feel like it is pretty consistent with their first painting being successful, you know. I think it's rare that someone walks away that they're like, well, I mean, there definitely are those people that are like, well, you could just go ahead and throw this in the trash too, but I think it's usually when they're with someone else that they say something like that and they feel this like comparative spirit or this embarrassment or this like, I told you I wasn't any good at this, or no, like it's when they're on their own. It's rare that they don't that they don't take it seriously, and it's rare that they are really really hard on themselves at the end of the night. What is that about, you think?
I don't know.
That we have to kind of like shine less around other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny that painting reveals so much about someone's personality and character that they don't even, they would be shocked to see how much it reveals. Maybe it's a character trait or something.
Yeah.
Rather than, it's sort of like under the veil of skill, there's so much going on that it has nothing to do with skill.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, like I think that I'd probably be like that way. The first thing I'd say to you is probably like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I think that I would be like that. I don't know, but I've learned so much about, and I respect everyone that comes in so much for just taking a leap and learning something new that I don't know. I think I've learned along the way of like to be kinder to yourself.
Yeah, so important. Yeah.
Give yourself the benefit of the doubt.
We talked recently also about a concept that I listened to from a therapist, psychologist that I think she's pretty amazing and with a lot of reputation. The concept of reverse narcissism.
Yes.
I was like, what the heck is that? Reverse narcissism. And I won't be able to kind of like explain it, but we talk how sometimes the way narcissism sort of like projects outside is by being selfish and just talking all the time or whatever, or not having listening skills, or there are many ways that we associate narcissism with ego. So reverse narcissism is precisely the opposite. It's the absence of that projection that ultimately brings the same amount of attention, if not more,
right,
to the person.
100%. Which I think we discovered is probably more common these days. Yeah.
It was very helpful to understand or have this understanding that when someone says I have no idea what I'm doing or what to do, or I mean, we're just obviously generalizing, and by all means we're just talking about not us, and by us meaning who have painted many years, but just people that come in for the very first time. and how I see how that could be a form of reverse narcissism.
Mhm.
And maybe it's a theory, maybe not, but it's ultimately the same goal. I wouldn't dare to say manipulating because that's a very strong word, but ultimately it's just getting as much attention
Absolutely.
towards you, and we possibly do it also. I'm not saying that we're
Yeah.
but it's an interesting concept that I never reflected on, the idea of getting attention by the lack of projection, you know.
Mhm.
You know, I think as artists we're all a little bit narcissistic in a way,
Yeah.
maybe. But it's interesting to find how we've been in situations that is so frustrating that even providing all the tools that we have, and even tools that we didn't have,
Mhm.
it's still not enough for someone to just take one step forward, not a breakthrough step, like a baby step. And we always, at the beginning, we always felt really frustrated because we thought it was on us. We were not able to guide properly. And I think in this past few months, I've learned that it's not all on us. There's this concept that is helping us understand that it's both sides, maybe.
Yeah. Both and.
Yes. Oh, so we still have like some time. So we're gonna go until 1:05, and I'm gonna work on the actual piece of cloth because I spend a lot of time with this part right here, which I consider very important because I feel like the attention gravitates towards that area. So I'm gonna bring some more whites and see if I can just bring like using the smallest brush and bringing more white on these areas. I'm gonna work from lighter to darker here. How about that? So just completely opposite and different. But mostly I wanna concentrate on very high contrast. There's some wrinkles right here, but I'm just gonna try to bring okay, so I'm gonna continue and maybe just start adding some darker notes. I didn't realize how actually much darker the shadow was. So I'm gonna try to make the work or the brush strokes a little bit more pixelated because I feel like with this fabric, it's darling.
Darlene for the win.
Oh my gosh, that was so hilariously funny. Not at all. No, we love you so much, and you are not on that page whatsoever. No, don't take it personal at all. You should join sessions where when we have like branding students and actually see uh, what happens. You know, yeah, that was so funny. Not at all. Not at all. Right. So I'm just gonna um, continue, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just not being an applied student right now. Just going back to the outside. I am going to bring some of that darker gray, and I said pixelating brush strokes would do it because I'm starting to feel like this is becoming a little bit too simplified. simplified to stylized to the point of looking almost that it's inflated with air, that it's not really a piece of clothing that's thin. So I have to be careful about the roundness of the strokes, about the continuation, about the excessive sinuous strokey lines, because otherwise it won't have that weight and thinness. And I feel like that's something that I'm trying to look or develop here or avoid. I'm going to bring some lighter notes from outside and see if I can bring a darker version right here. This will be for sure, all this work will be better expanded and explored on the studio time next Friday. And I'm really looking forward to that, to kind of like really dig in and try to flip all the cards on the table and understand that the areas of weakness on the painting are areas where things are too skeletal or simplified or not developed enough. But for now, I think I'm just going to do a little bit of work, a few more minutes, a little bit of work on this fold right here, which already you can see that it's breaking that predictability. And yeah, and it's starting to sort of like become a little bit more interesting in that sense. So I'm going to bring some gray right up here. I think this will concentrate the most detail, the fabric. And I'm really looking forward to adding more detail to the fabric. I think ultimately, yeah. Before we sort of like stop the recording, we have a surprise for you, Darlene, that is going to make you so happy. You have no idea. It's going to change, yeah, your approach to the painting. Anyhow, so I think, right, Jen?
Yes.
You just wait. But anyhow, I'm just like I'm having much more satisfying approach to developing this area of the fabric, a combination of being more pointillistic with the darks over the lighter area, also trying to diversify the values beneath the fold. I'm gonna also try to change a little bit the edges because this is very straight and you cannot see how this undulation of the fabric really hides the piece of fabric underneath. It's all just one straight line. And I think that's very important. You can appreciate it a little bit on the fabric, but this will be small. I think I couldn't be happier with the subject and the approach that we've taken, because I feel like this will be a perfect opportunity to really develop the details on the piece of fabric and create something absolutely stunning in the next couple of weeks. So we are gonna stop the recording and take a 10-minute break. 1:15 we'll just get together if you're there and sort of like reconnect and see the work if you want to, and if not, sort of like talk about difficulties and challenges and where to go from here and what to prioritize and what sort of like steps we should take, and we hope to be helpful. But yeah, 10 minutes, we won't be recording after that. It'll be sort of like, as you know, open forum. If you can, take a picture and upload it, regardless of the stage. You can always take it down later if you want. So don't feel like that's something that you have to commit to. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of like talk more about it and learn about our own painting. So I'm going to stop the recording. We'll see you at 1:15 our time.